So we're very excited about this particular video to be able to go and actually frame the modules that we're actually offering for the first time, and these have been in creation literally for over a year.
A year and a half
because
of
we're trying
together.
Because we're trying to figure out how do we frame this for a world that doesn't think they need this. And thank you very much, COVID-19 and the pandemic, and people are actually feeling like they need to actually fix something because things aren't going the way that they wanted them to or they anticipated. And we have wonderful documentaries like The Social Dilemma that actually they're all in some version of panic, trying to think, oh my gosh, what are we going to do? And we were saying last night in particular, said, oh my gosh, this is what we're here. This is our purpose. This is why we're on the planet, is to be able to help with this alternative that's a bottom-up network orientation to freedom.
And the bottom up is speaking to the roots where we shot yesterday.
Yeah.
Is like how to feel grounded when the world is in a swirl and chaos. It's so easy to get oops and get caught up in the fear and be so disoriented about what the world is and who you are. And so to be able to get very grounded in this time and to step into your power and into your conscious creation is everything.
Yeah. And so the mechanics of being feature things like being able to go and identify internal maps, internal compass, internal navigation keys. And in the practical physical world, what we're talking about is energy management practices. We're also talking about body healing practices. And we're also talking about storytelling, because what are the stories you're telling yourself? And then how are you listening to the stories that the market is telling you?
Right. We have deep reflection practices for yourself and then also for the market. And the power in this is that you align not just yourself, but you align yourself to dream clients, dream partners, and dream reality ultimately.
And we were playing with this. This impacts strategy, it impacts planning, it impacts structure, accountability, rewards, consequences, decision making, communication, problem solving. There is nothing in a business context that this does not reframe and totally reinvent, rather than from a top down or bottom up. So we could go on with all the little segmented classifications of things that actually researchers and scientists said, this is what makes a good business. Fantastic strategy, value proposition, outreach to clients, all kinds of things. Are saying, you know what, that little segmented way, you actually get into 1 billion different things you have to do. And we've been led to believe if you're not getting the results you want, the problem is in one of those billion things that science and educators and therefore business people have convinced you that you need, you have to get that mechanics of doing and go and improve on that. And our orientation is mechanics of being.
Conversation that we were having over there, and we moved over here and we decided to turn the camera on because we watched the Social Dilemma documentary
two nights in a row,
and it really got
on
us
Netflix
jazzed about what we're offering.
So for me, the thing that got it jazzed, like I know what really got me jazzed. Do you have something you want to lead with
that got me jazzed?
Yeah.
Well, the thing that got me jazzed was having this understanding that we are all the creators of our reality.
Okay.
And with the internet, it's really allowing us and amplifying this understanding that our world is 100% subjective. And how that they were talking about how are we ever going to come together when we're all in these silos? And we're saying, hey, this is awesome because actually it's just amplifying that it always was subjective. Always was subjective.
So the whole premise, when I look at it, to back up to frame it from where it is, I've been looking at this for years, is that because of I'm a creative singer-songwriter, I realize songs don't come from my head, I stream them. As a painter, I realize I'm getting help with painting. Trying to even just frame a picture and then color choices and those types of things. It's not coming just from Tim, it's coming from streaming. And so I've recognized this idea of the way science has actually framed this. That doesn't make sense. You're a creative person, so you fall outside our little box of actually identifying how the world works. And science latched on to objectivism. And objectivism, or so Cartesian duality. Because at the point in time, they were having a fight with the church, and the church says, we're going to actually do spirituality, which is all about oneness, or some version of that. And they were the powerhouse. And science came in and said, Newton and the boys, and they said, all right, we can't actually do that. I think it's maybe we are all connected, but I can't actually go on about that, and we can't actually create this whole thing called science. So we're going to stay with duality. So that was handed down through the stages, and I got a post, and I have written on that actually in different places, like how many of Aristotle and who's the guy who's the Pythagoras, all those folks sense that we're all connected. But that's not what the rest of society could use to build buildings and actually build a society. So they went to duality. So from that perspective, way back whenever that was, a number of years ago, thousands of years ago, we've moved forward with this premise that science informs education, which informs business, which informs governments, which informs the structure of our society. So everything is premised on the idea that we are not connected. We are actually in an objective world, and you have to actually prove truth, and the only folks that have truth are the people at the high part of the pyramid. So in the structure, they're the ones that are actually running the society up here. So there's in the government and academia and business and science in any form relative to medical and everything else. And those folks are looking at moving forward and saying, as a society, the only thing that holds society together is we have an objectively verifiable, provable truth. Mm-hmm. And what's happened, what you saw happening, which now actually plays out in digital, but prior to digital, you saw it happening in broadcast. That's the part I thought was so cool, that you've seen this happening and evolving and intuitively followed this and been in front of the wave every single time, but not been able to piece together, okay, so where's my space in this? Where do I actually play a role in this huge, big tidal wave that's happening, this shift that's happening from objective to subjective?
Right, so coming from the broadcast industry, and then also coming from the spiritual understanding of the way reality is that it's all inside, and it is 100% subjective. And with the internet broadening the scope of what different types of reality we can exist in,
right?
In terms of even how we're being educated, with YouTube and being able to. Can you hear Finny?
Can you hear the dog in the background?
Dog. So kind of looking to the future and seeing how broadcasting was going to change from just a few conglomerates. We'll pause this. This has just been my reality. What I've had to say has fallen on deaf ears, because I've I've always been ahead of the mainstream, and so my thinking and my visioning of the future, I've always been way out there, and so it never really made sense what I had to say. And watching the documentary last night just got me really jazzed to say, hey, what I have seen is happening, and what I have created or been guided to create, as Tim was saying, that music is just streamed through us. So this idea and premise of flow network, is exactly, I created it with this understanding of the concept of trust becoming more and more of an issue in society. I was just commenting on the metaphor of what I've had to say has always fallen on deaf ears. It seems that getting across my big
idea is actually always been a challenge.
It's always been a challenge. So I plugged two
in, okay.
So this is where the second one goes.
Got it. All right. So we're back. And I was just, as I was saying, that I've always kind of been ahead of the curve as a visionary. And what prompted me to want to create my own network, studying television broadcasting, before even smartphones existed, it never would have been a possible thought in my mind that I would be able to even create my own TV channel, let alone a network. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that was just an
Because it
amazing.
was the broadcasting giants.
It was, and there was conglomerates, and I started off at CTV and Master Control, and I had, what I liked about television broadcasting was all of it. I liked to be a part of all of the creation, and really they silo you into a specific job, right? So that was never of interest to me. So to be a producer or someone that had all this creative capacity, you'd have to stay in the industry for a really long time in order to climb and make
Oh
your
my
way.
God, this is so your generation. Yeah, I don't want to have to climb through all those steps that my generation had to do. No, I want to actually be at the top of that right away. And
Right.
it would totally, with the technology and the structure available, that just wouldn't have been possible. Now,
Right, but
it's entirely
it
possible.
it is, and but it wasn't when I was in it, right? And so
Right.
I was offered a more of a outside of the box job at a startup company
Right.
that was tech for broadcasters, bridging it during a time when the industry was changing from physical tapes and assets to digital.
Digital
So it was
assets,
quite
yeah.
a big
Transformation.
hubbub transformation within the industry, because they had all this technology that didn't talk to each other, and so this was a technology that was literally bridging hundreds of different technologies so they could all speak and work seamlessly
So
together.
you started off your career as a natural bridger.
I did, and I found
And bridgers of generations too, if I seem to recall, because here you are coming in at a relatively young age.
Yeah, I looked like I was 16, and I was training and educating men your age
Yeah.
on how their new job was going
All
to
around
look.
the world.
All around
Because
the
they
world.
flew you all over the place doing
Yes.
that, which was a pretty cool gig.
It was a really cool gig. So I got to just see how television stations operated in the old world, and also be a part of how they were going to operate in the new world. But then even seeing beyond that in watching social media and YouTube come online, and how I saw that changing, technology changing how broadcasting would be working.
In what way did you see that changing?
I saw it changing in terms of how easy it would be for someone who was a creator to create their own TV show. So, for instance, when Facebook first came out, it didn't start with video. And when video came about, I started advertising my fitness business through video before I saw anybody else do that.
Mm-hmm.
And then I had this idea of, oh my gosh, I could just create my own TV show and put it on social media, which no one was doing back then either.
Yeah.
And so even educating people on, hey, yeah, you can still call it a TV show just because it's not on TV. The broadcasting world. This is the new TV. In the past, we had this notion that if you really want to be successful, you have to go to Hollywood. You have to be you have to move to the States.
Yeah.
Because that's where people make money, and I just thought that seems just so ridiculous. There's so much talent in Toronto and Canada. Why don't we empower ourselves here and start bringing this on the map, bringing Toronto on the map, and bringing money into this area so people want to stay and promote, where they're from and all
So
that.
you were into community development even.
I was into community
Economic community development.
I was into economic community development. So then I started my own TV show for a little bit and was empowering other businesses to do the same thing as a forward way of promoting and advertising what they do, with this understanding of people are going to have more of a challenge in understanding who they can trust. So how do we gain trust in a digital world where I'm not going to meet you, I'm not going to be able to sit on the couch and have a conversation and get to know you, but if I can tune in and watch you on a couch having a conversation with someone else, then that starts to develop trust before I decide I want to work with you or buy from you.
Perfect.
Or anything like that. So that's what I did with a number of businesses, and they grew their customer base that way.
Yeah.
And
this is before that became popular as a mechanism for growing business. Certainly before where we're sitting right now is the pandemic.
Right. I in fact, like 3 years ago, was educating businesses on why they even needed to have video as a part of their business.
Yeah, I remember that conversation we had over here in Burlington with another individual who was actually going and helping business leaders start to actually get involved in this. And the business leaders would be my age. I go, I don't know. Can I pay you some money and maybe you can help figure us out and help us get on there? And I remember listening to him talk about it. I thought, wow, And I did not have the sense to understand that this was going to converge around digital. And right now with the pandemic, the only way people are communicating, the only way business is actually getting done right this second is through digital technology.
And so the other interesting piece with that, when I was teaching the broadcast masterclass of, you have to make video, it started to make people more aware of who they were. Because
Explain that. What do you mean by that?
because all of a sudden you have a camera on you, and how people have this weird thing in hearing their voice. Oh, is that really my voice? Is that what I really sound
on
like?
the playback.
On a playback. So not is it just your voice, it's you. So you are having to watch yourself back.
So you've never seen yourself
or you've never
on camera,
you've never been comfortable to be on camera.
Right.
What's the reason for that? I started to have this awareness of, well, being authentic on video is really about how are you authentic off of video.
Yeah, because all that's happened is there's a button that's gone on and somebody's actually recording you.
Right, but having a camera there brings this extra awareness, the observer, because you're going to observe yourself.
So it's accountability.
It's an accountability of yourself.
Right.
Do I feel comfortable with myself? Do I feel comfortable with what I'm saying? And if not, why not?
Would I actually trust that person when I look at it? So for instance, if I look at myself back on the film, saying, would I trust that person? Mm-hmm. How do I feel about that person? Mm-hmm. Because trust, as we have identified, most people think trust is all about trusting other people and trusting the circumstances going on out there. It all starts inside. So you got to trust yourself first.
So a camera is this observer. It's that observer, and we talk about in the spiritual world, like become the observer.
Yeah, the witness.
Right? The witnesser of yourself.
Witness consciousness.
Right.
Yeah.
So for someone who has never really understood that concept or even have an awareness of what does that even mean, that camera acts as the observer, because you really are holding yourself accountable to what are the words I'm putting out there, what is the message I'm putting out there, how am I putting myself out there, because I'm going to be watching myself back. If I'm not going to watch myself back because it's too uncomfortable, other people are going to be watching myself back anyway.
Well, but what's the likelihood of success if you can't even watch yourself back?
Right. So it's interesting because with public speakers who are comfortable speaking in public, that's one of the big fears for most people, is having to speak in front of people.
Yeah, apparently you'd rather be at a funeral. You'd rather be the person in the coffin than the person actually up front doing a speech.
Right. So now in a world of digital where we're just in this room, just you and I, and there's just a piece of technology here.
Yes.
So why does that make one feel uncomfortable? Well, if we talk about energy, we don't know who's going to be watching this in the future, and how does that affect how we talk? Right. Because
when we first went on camera together, which is about a year ago, we started talking about it. So imagine on the other side of this camera, there's our ideal audience, and so connect with them through the camera. As I said, when you're actually running a race, don't actually run a race right to where the camera is, where it actually takes your picture. Run past where the camera is, so that you actually don't start to slow down as you approach the camera in a physical world. In a digital world, talk to the people who are your target audience as if they are in the room.
And so what I would teach in my broadcast masterclass was like to be able to look right into the lens, wherever it is on this camera.
It's over here on the left.
Right, like as if you're looking right into one person's eye, because even in public speaking, they usually say, don't talk to the whole, because it feels there's a disconnection. Speak as if you're speaking to one person.
This is what the Beatles did in the album cover for, oh my God, it was Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Heart Club Band. I think it was that one. Yeah. And so what they did is they just posed for a picture and they looked through the camera. And it's one of those iconic photographs that still is talked about to this day. I'm not sure which album it was. But I remember hearing about that thinking, what? Initially, what?
Right, because yes, it is a piece of technology, but it's very easy to imagine who it is you're speaking to, who is it that you want to speak to. And so when I work with clients, this is usually what I address. Like, imagine you're speaking to your dream client or your dream partner or whoever it is that you're wanting to connect with.
Yeah.
And that lens is their eye, and you're speaking from your heart to them. Because how do we transfer this feeling of trust that's easier in physical proximity through technology? And then there's a difference between something that's pre-recorded and the feeling of what that is.
Right, and live.
And then to something live, then through Zoom, because each...
Can you explain the difference? Like, what is the experience that you've had when you actually are recording something that's pre-recorded versus difference of something that's live? What experience have you had with that?
Well, if something's pre-recorded, you have this understanding of like, well, I could just sit on my phone and, maybe it's not going anywhere, and if the dog barks, then we can stop it. And so it's just has a different sense. But when it's live, and especially when you're on a social media and you see the numbers go up, like who's tuning in, you don't actually know who's on the other side, but you know that there's somebody there.
Right. So you're actually now starting to talk through this and speak, I seem to recall our conversations, you're experiencing it inside. Mm-hmm. Because communication, it's like 85% is nonverbal. The communication that takes place is heart-to-heart connection, sensations, images, and it's even using your imagination and the feelings and thoughts. And the words are, about 15% of what's being communicated. So I remember we were talking about that and practicing just turning it into a live, because I remember the first few times we did that.
Yeah.
And I could feel a huge difference talking to a camera that's live, because there's an energy stream that comes through it.
And actually, this is where we sat in this very spot the first time we ever did a video together, which was a live on my first network.
Right.
About a year and a half ago.
Yeah. And I remember that feeling very bizarre. Like, I remember inside
I think it was
feeling
your first time you've ever done a live.
And I thought, jeepers, I can feel that.
Yeah. Yeah. And then each platform would have its own energy signature, whether you're going through Facebook or YouTube or Zoom.
Why do you think that is?
Based on who the creator of that platform was. And then who...
the creator. So if you're actually...
The creator, programmer...
So who... Zuckerberg, he has an energy that he actually used in piecing the code together.
Right.
And that would be, what I'm hearing you say, that would be entrained. That would actually be part of the energy signature. Right. So every time you connect with Facebook, you connect with that energy signature. And it would be an attractor for anyone else who's comfortable with that energy signature.
Right. And talking about...
That's brilliant.
The intention of the creator.
Yes.
When they're creating it. And, we talk, watching in that documentary or that article, whoever, I don't know whose quote this is, that the more virtual we get, the more ritual we need.
Explain that, please.
So what is the energy and the intention that you are adding to what you do?
Which is the ritual of becoming conscious of what it is that you're doing.
Right. This being a mechanics of being.
Yes.
So are you being present to the intention of the energy you're putting into what you are doing? So that before I go on camera, and even before you were in the room today, I set an energy. Yeah. I had my ritual of, this video is intended to reach, the people that are looking for this message as a base understanding.
So interesting, because I just interject with Sharon, my wife and business partner and partner in music. We did music for 7 years. And every time we would actually go to a gig, we'd arrive at the gig early, and she would say she's setting the room. And I came from an accounting background. Like, I was creative and all kinds, but I remember talking. What are you talking about? Well, I'm setting the intention of the space we're going to play in, be it a bar, a cafe, an auditorium, whatever it was. She arrived, and you have to arrive at least a half an hour early to just set the space, the energy of the space, the intention of the space. This is a welcoming place. We're going to actually share our music and share our stories. And we'd have people driving from all over the place to actually just be around us in that situation. And it was crafting magic. It was staging what I called synchronicity. So magic would happen in those moments all the time.
Yeah, because we're really coming to this understanding of the power of the intention in our formless, like we are the creators of our reality. What are we intentionally creating? And watching that documentary, the intention for some of these people who are now feeling guilty for what they created through
Which
the
documentary are you talking about? You're talking about the social dilemma that just came out on Netflix. Yes.
Yeah, the one that we were talking about earlier, that they have this angst about, we didn't realize we created this monster.
Yes.
Is their perspective of it now, right? And farming people's data. So their intention in the beginning was, well, this is just business. This is this is business. We're
selling
looking
advertising.
at what is our business model? What is the best way to create money? That was their intention.
Yeah.
And not to judge it as good or bad, but as we move forward in digital, our power lies in our intention, in our humanness.
Yes, because their concern, as we watching that documentary, and we've observed this over time, is that the premise of society is that everything's objectively verifiable. There's a truth, and the people who are actually going to in charge of conveying and broadcasting the truth are the broadcast networks, and they are the ones who actually get it straight from the horse's mouth, be that a politician or a business leader or a medical expert. And so you can count on anything that's coming through broadcast media. That was the thinking. Anything's coming through broadcast media from this top-down hierarchical frame of reference, you could trust as the truth. And that, for everybody who was actually the leader up here in the hierarchy, that's what was the glue that held society together for them. There was this objectively verifiable, and then the legal system is built on that, saying there's a right and there's a wrong. And what we saw happening in and explained very well in the social dilemma video is that that's actually going away. The world is becoming fractured because of the way feeds happen. The feeds will happen. For me, I'll actually get updates on news that are very, very tailored to what it is I've watched before and what I believe. And then you're going to get a totally different news feed. And they pointed out, I have not done much in the way of homework to say, are you getting the same news feed as me? I just assume you are. But after a while, we become misaligned because your feed is just some nuance, a little bit off, and it becomes more 100% subjective to you. Mine's 100% subjective to mine. And we end up living in these little silos. And their concern, rightly so, is the way that social order has been maintained, certainly in democracies, is that we have this understanding of an objectively verifiable truth. Now the world's moving to 100% subjective. How are we going to control that is their concern. And our point has always been, you never did control it.
Right. We just had this perception that we did, and we had this perception.
Our point has always been, you never did control it.
Right. We just had this perception that we did, and we had this perception that the world was objective, like using the example of television. So growing up, I didn't have a smartphone, and we just had our television device. So as a family unit, we were all watching the same thing, getting the same information, and having the same version of reality. And as we all got our own devices, and we were able to look through what was actually interesting for us, which is just getting more and more divided in the family.
Yeah.
Now with the COVID and all the different fallouts that are happening, the Black Lives Matter or all the awarenesses that are occurring in society,
and all the conspiracy theories and all the wild things that are actually
all the different
emerging.
Versions of realities that are out there,
which are billions now.
Right.
Trillions of versions of reality being fed to us as individuals. You get one version of reality, I get a different version of reality.
Yeah, so let's just using a family, because hearing different clients and friends talk about like, oh geez, I never knew that I was so far off the belief system of my brother or my sister.
Right.
And
we're so misaligned.
And then because we so want our reality to be right, we'll create arguments and, no, you have to believe what I have to believe. And so going back to what I saw back when, I was developing and why I developed a network, I had this foresight to see trust is going to become a huge challenge.
Yeah. So it's a pivot from this notion of objectively verifiable truth,
right,
to something that's subjectively engaged with, which is trust.
Right. And so how can we come together in harmony as a society, community, and still accept that we all have our own realities and our own belief systems, but work towards what it is that we all want as a human, which is freedom, harmony, prosperity.
Right. There's a subjective truth. That's the ultimate subjective truth of what it is to be a human being. The mechanics of being is all premised on a navigation key that is, I'm really wanting to be free. Unshackle me from any and all the beliefs I felt were pushed down on me. And your generation does such a freaking awesome job. My generation, we just kept on slugging it through. And then my parents' generation, they didn't even question it. If you were a woman, my mom's choices were secretary, nurse, and educator. That's the three choices that she had.
That was how tight our realities were defined for us in these boxes.
Yeah.
And the technology, or the internet and social media has, I mean, there's good and bad with everything. It's just how we perceive it and use it. So it's allowed us to break free from the conditioning of who we're supposed to be.
Right.
And this time on our planet is amplifying this understanding of like, you can be anything you want to be, but you really got to look at first who you thought that you had to be, who you're not, and use that as a contrast to define who it is that you really are. And that requires breaking out of our siloed bubbles.
Who you thought you were.
Because they're who we thought we were. Exactly.
Yeah, and then you actually move who you thought you were, and you move out into this new reality, and you start to discover who you're not, because you're starting to talk to other folks. Go, well, that's not who I am. That's not who I am, and it's too resonant.
Right.
And so we go through this iterative: who I thought I was, who I'm not; who I thought I was, who I'm not, and we start to let go of those things that we don't want to carry forward, and eventually get to who we authentically are. Who I thought I was, who I'm not. And we start to let go of those things that we don't want to carry forward and eventually get to who we authentically are, which is the three stages we talk about in terms of personal development. And the interesting thing that is the backstory to this, which we were talking about in our social feeds, as well as just even putting together these advertisements, was this notion of oops, owning other people's stuff. And in a conventional, historic, legacy, top-down, objectively verifiable, there is now a growing number of scientists who are identifying that this owning other people's stuff, is in fact a legitimate concept. Because I think in this blog here, I said, so neuroscientists refer to oops as neural entrainment. Psychologists refer to oops as emotional contagion. Mainstream science refers to oops as groupthink. Biologists identified in 1996 this thing, the mirror neuron in our heads in humans and primates, identifies as a means by which humans grasp the minds of others, as if their thoughts, and more importantly, their feelings and emotions and behaviors, were their own. Oops. And then Dr. Daniel Signal at Mindset Institute says that extended interconnected resonance circuitry, which we call internal network effect, within the mirror neuron system creates the capacity for the attunement of the mind. So the attunement actually works at the energy level, and this notion of alignment works at the information level. And as the logic of complex living systems says, we all contain or are made up of information plus energy vibrating within a bandwidth frequency. And so where trust starts is you have to trust yourself, going, this is who I am. And now I'm actually starting to engage with other people, and I didn't know I'm oopsing. I didn't even know oopsing even existed.
Right. And this to circle back to the creator of the platforms and the energy that we're engaging with. Platforms
like Facebook or Reddit,
Instagram, YouTube, LinkedIn, Zoom.
Yep.
And the energy participating into that. If the energy participating into that, and again, circling back to intention or ritual, and setting the space, right? There's going to be, are we setting that space with fear and confusion and overwhelm and distrust? Or are we consciously showing up to those platforms with the intention of creating trust and creating love and creating this sense of freedom? And that, for me, is where we're stepping into the space empowered as conscious creators to say, what if we can change this whole thing?
Which is a whole objective and premise for Flow Network.
For Flow Network, to to say, okay, well, let's bring conscious leaders to the table,
Yeah.
and let's, utilize what we can through video technology, and understand that it is about trust, and
Yeah.
by showing, just by being, that we are coming together, however we're attracting whoever we're attracting,
like attracts like
attracts like, and we're obviously going to be resonating, love and heart, and all the energy of who we are.
Yes.
That becomes an attractor as the network grows, to say, hey, all of these people are aligned or attuned, even though they have different backgrounds and different perspectives. And that's why we talk about the power of our working together,
right?
The journey of generation gap, and
so big age difference,
yes,
and also gender difference, obviously.
Yes.
And we look at on the planet right now, and it seems to me that we have this notion of women rising, yin rising, love rising, and that's causing challenges within the old hierarchy, because that there's not a space for love typically in those hierarchies. It's all fear based,
right? And
so the pivot is actually to something that actually is more grassroots,
yes,
premised on we're all one, we're loving each other, we're actually looking for freedom, we're looking to be involved in a supportive community.
Right, that we can accept each other's different opinions and realities.
So the information gap, which is, we're misaligned sometimes in that, but from an attunement, energy, our intention in terms of coming together,
yes,
is always aligned.
Right, and yes.
The intention is alive.
The
information that I choose to use might sound like, oh my gosh, we talked about this last week. I thought we were on the same page. And I'm thinking, we are on the same page. I'm just actually now coming at it from another different angle that actually allows me to access what I think is my specialty, or my sweet spot in life. And you have a different sweet spot, in the way, in the language, and the usage of that language would be a bit different. But at the attuned energy level, we are what we call a coherent system.
Yes. And so that oopsing that occurs when a diverse groups come together, and this is also, part of the network, is understanding that the next phase of evolution is about growing in community, in interdependent,
with interdependent
relationships.
Yes.
Which is, just talking to Sharon this morning, it's easier said than done, because we come from a world that is, it's doesn't really have this understanding that win-win is possible.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, we can talk and intellectually go, yeah, win.
Right.
Except when I get triggered and I fear I'm not going to win.
Right. And so that's an oops.
Yeah.
Right. Like a fear, a scarcity, and that's all the illusion that we are looking to clear through this community understanding of evolution.
Yes.
And that, hey, what if we can actually all come together? There's a grace period needed, that we will have triggers based off of, our old understanding and programming of how we thought the world worked.
Yep.
And that's when the oops switches to, it's actually, not to be another thing to negate and try to run away from, but actually understand that that's how we grow and expand our bandwidth.
Right. The idea is, again, because we've talked about oops a number of times, oops, emotional contagion. We actually we experience other people all the time. And as a business leader, it typically is the unwritten understanding that you allow people to tuck into your bandwidth. And business leaders are able to lead because they have big bandwidth capacity. So the capacity to accommodate information plus energy. And as a leader, it's your responsibility to make sure that people feel comfortable. They feel that they can trust themselves. They feel like they're able to get things done, and then they feel like they're willing to follow your lead. And as a leader, the challenge that has happened post-pandemic, or even just as the pandemic, COVID-19, took off, and we're in this pandemic, a global pandemic, is most people on the planet have moved from somewhere where they're actually trusting themselves and they're flowing in some degree within their performance boxes, within an organization, be that organization a big one, medium one, small one, doesn't much matter. But what was really important previous to COVID was people had a comfort level with a degree of uncertainty and a degree of fear. So there was a certain level of fear on the planet, and most people in a business context would say, all right, so I can now tuck into, in a business, I can tuck into the bandwidth of the leader. And in my family life, I'll tuck into the bandwidth of mom or dad or whoever has the biggest bandwidth in the family. And that was doable up until, March 2020. And post March 2020, when COVID really took off, what's happened is there is an unprecedented amount of fear on the planet at this point in time. So what that means is if we're all connected, which science has actually agreed, we're all connected. The mirror neuron actually allows us
science and thousands of years
of
ago,
ancient wisdom that actually allows us to understand that we're all connected. We're all connected, and if we have people all around the world at the same time becoming really, really fearful, and as a leader, all I did is I needed to carry 20 of my people in my bandwidth, or 1,000 people in the bandwidth. And we observe this as soon as some of the big leaders, even in the spiritual communities, who actually had a whole pile of people tapped into them, and they were actually leading some big names. And you had made the observation, you could see them in the videos. They look very, very stretched, and it's because what's happened is there's so much fear. You're not just carrying the 20 people or the 3 people in your family, the 20 people in your business, or the 10,000 or 1,000 or whatever it is in your business. You're now oopsing everybody on the planet's fear. And you're carrying that. And if you don't understand that that's what's going on, and what happens is you start to doubt yourself, because trust starts with self. But now all of a sudden I'm starting to feel there's so much fear going on that I can't isolate it. It's outside my business. I'm thinking it's the clients. I'm thinking it's the suppliers. I'm thinking it's the financiers. And you know what? You are right, because we're all connected. So the level of fear that's gone up, just to finish the concept, the level of fear that's gone up, if you do not know how to let go, or you don't even have an intellectual understanding that that's what's going on, you will suffer from mental illness, disengagement, phobias going like all over the place. And it's all the same thing. It's all oops.
And if you're not doing that, you're numbing it out. And
doing the mental toughness.
Doing the mental toughness thing, which will only last so long. Before
you just break down.
You break down. And so I had this experience yesterday. We were just shot the go-to-market ads.
Right.
And then, immediately have the opportunity to experience an oops with, family members messaging and whatnot. And, using that opportunity and the awareness to observe what was actually happening in my physiology.
So you were feeling, to actually frame it, my observation, you was feeling really high, big bandwidth as a function of we were so excited about all the shoots and the stuff that came out. You get that bit, you breach the bandwidth, which you also have the phenomena says you breach, and then to sustain the breach outside your existing bandwidth, there it was, and you actually extend it. You also have to let go of fear you didn't know you're oopsing.
Right. And that's the brilliant thing with having the mechanics, to just witness that burning, that fear, whatever it is that you're feeling inside, and just stay present with it. That's the whole brilliance of what the oopsing is about. It's like, oh, this is another opportunity for me to actually expand my bandwidth.
And so the mechanics associated with staying present and all those types of things, those are types of things that will, in a different video or a different module, will actually go through the practice of learning how to accommodate other people's fear, and then also how to actually let go or neutralize those types of things.
Right.
But to start off, you have to actually start to become aware. And then self-aware that it's not it's not a phenomenon that's happening out there. It actually, you're experiencing it inside.
Right. And because we have been such a society where it was easier to numb it out or forget about it.
Or to blame other people. You stop being upset. You stop being upset.
That's not my fear. That's not my whatevers. We're all now having to take the responsibility for the fears and the scarcity feelings that are literally programmed in our DNA from 7 generations back.
Yeah.
So we all have this, and it's our opportunity, responsibility to realize that we have our own clearing to do, every single one of us.
And so this seven generations back is, from a science standpoint, is the epigenetics. So it's not it's epigenetics talks about this, and the logic of complex living systems in tying that together with epigenetics. And Dr. Bruce Lipton does a great job as a biologist to be able to go and explain how that all works. That's what's actually we're carrying that forward at the beginning. So we're wearing all the fear and oopsing like crazy from mom and dad. So when we're born into the world, how we actually come into the world, we start oopsing all over the place. We actually own other people's stuff because that's how we acclimatize and get some sense of how does life work on this planet. So we come into the world oopsing like freaking crazy.
Yeah, we come in pre-programmed with
oops.
In our actual DNA, we have the fear of, our ancestors that went through war or famine, and their reality
lost all their money,
was scarcity. Their reality was so fear-based, rightly so. And rightly so, we have a lot to fear now as well on the planet, if we're looking in terms of what we talk about, like a 3D, like the matrix,
right, 3 dimensions,
the third dimension. But this point in our evolution is to say, hey, we are the creators of our reality, not the broadcasting, not science, not these top
Instagram,
down, these top down objective, like the world is objective. No, we create our reality. We have the power inside of ourselves to say, hey, like, what if we can, with our energy, intentionally, with ritual, say, this is a safe space. This is a space of infinite possibilities. This is a
birthing of and a creating place from which you can actually create all the vehicles you need to actually go and engage with and realize your purpose and your desire to be free.
And create, and circle back to how we started this, when you're as a painter or as a musician, you are the vessel by which the art comes through you. And so long as you're clear of fear, you can create magnificence. If you were to start your painting with, I don't know.
All tight in my body.
I don't know if I know what to do. Is this the right color? And
trying to paint, I'm not sure how to actually do that.
Second-guessing and doubting every step along the way, chances of that being something you're going to love is...
No, it's going to feel all scratchy and ecky and whatever, and the color balance will be off, and my sense of what it is I've created will be, that's just, I can't even look at that. So I got to actually throw that out or tear it up, or I'm not happy with that. It's not a reflection of who I authentically am.
Right. So that speaks to the mechanics of doing in the old world versus push and mental force to get things done. What is the energy with which you do that? Versus the mechanics of being and understanding the energy, it comes first. And it's not that you never do anything again, but it coming from this full place of trust. I trust myself.
Establishing being, trusted.
Trusting myself. This is going to be fun. This is something that I really want to create. There is an absence of fear. This is what the mechanics of being is all about.
And the interesting thing, again, tapping in, because it was just the last 2 nights looking at the social dilemma that's featured on Netflix. The people that were actually featured in that particular documentary are the people who either invested in it or have researched it, or are the people that have created the algorithms and the deep wormholes of their AI. And they never intended for this to actually be used as a fear-based mechanism. And so all of their prognosis and all of their forecasts to the future saying, we've got to change this. We have to change this. Oh my gosh, it's beyond our scope to be able to actually think and understand how we can change this, because from their perspective, everything was 100% objective, top down. And our perspective, it's 100% subjective, bottom up. Top down is codependent and at best independent. Bottom up is actually interdependent. It's this community. So there is a way forward that actually is very trust-based, very supportive of new ideas, new concepts, sharing The decentralized finance circles and cryptocurrency and all those types of things are supporting more of a decentralized bottom-up orientation to politics, medicine, finance, business, life, education.
And it is all based on the premise of the inside out, which
Yeah.
is the internal network effect,
Yeah.
which at the heart of that is ritual, is intention, is
and to be reminded every day, every second of every day, and there's where ritual comes in place.
Yeah.
Start your day off with ritual. And in a couple hours in, do another ritual. A couple hours in, and then it starts to become just automatic.
It's you're restructuring your neural network inside your brain about how you are creating consciously your every moment. As a whole organism and a whole structure. So to stay in a silo, whether we're talking about the body or whether we're talking about business or whether we're talking about society as a whole, is no longer applicable. And so we really need to look at the world, look at ourselves through this holistic lens. And our challenge in going to market has been, going to market niche is very important.
Yeah.
And that's kind of goes against what
the niche really is people actually frame their life experience as interdependent and have a desire to actually work in an interdependent, high trust network with other people who could become co-creators and or co-clients or co-suppliers. And the interesting thing with a bottom-up community orientation, it's the resonance of the individuals and then the coherence of that whole system that sells and attracts high finance, attracts value, attracts wealth and well-being, not one or the other. And that's typically in a top-down hierarchy. You actually have to choose between wealth or well-being. In a bottom-up that we're suggesting exists already. All we have to do is actually just put our heads around it. Wealth and well-being is the desired outcome because it actually provides freedom. Mm-hmm. So check out, we're very excited the opportunity to actually share our story with you in a little bit more detail, and we invite you to check out the offering that we have in terms of four learning modules. And I think we've actually...
Well, and actually for this first round, not only will you get these 4 learning modules, but you'll actually be able to engage with us.
Right, we're going to do those live.
Right. Because
so you can ask questions and get some deeper understanding of these things based on what your needs are.
Right, your specific needs are. So this is us looking to attract our dream clients and who resonates with this message. So we're really excited to work with you. And if you'd like to see our previous work, we have a couple of series and more than a couple series out there. We have
on the flownetwork.ca.
On the Flow Network, we have the Big Pivot, which was released right at the beginning of the pandemic, and then before that we have the Big Game and the Big Play, and we just get deeper into these types of concepts.